The Sunday morning light streamed through the stained glass windows of First Grace Community Church, painting the polished oak pews in bands of ruby and sapphire. As the congregation rose to sing the opening hymn, Amazing Grace, a hush of reverence fell over the hall. At the front stood Pastor Michael Bennett, his presence both commanding and gentle, exactly the kind of man parishioners imagined as a shepherd for their souls. His voice, warm and assured, guided the worshipers through the verses as though each word carried them toward heaven. In the front row sat Grace Fletcher and her husband Daniel, two small boys nestled at their sides. To Grace, Bennett was more than a pastor. He was the man who had married them, baptized their children, and offered a steady hand when Daniel's father died. She'd first met him years before, when he'd visited her fifth-grade classroom to read a children's Bible story. He exuded an authenticity that drew both children and adults into trust without question. Later that afternoon, the Fletchers returned to the fellowship hall for the church's inaugural family retreat. The hum of excited chatter filled the cavernous space as families milled around tables laden with crafts, snacks, and a large wooden crate stamped in bold letters, "Do not open." Beneath the sign, Pastor Bennett hovered, fielding questions with his signature calm. "It's for the youth group's scavenger hunt," he explained when Grace asked what was inside. His eyes met hers in a way that made her hesitate. She sensed a flicker of something, guardedness, perhaps, but he masked it with a gentle smile. "All will be revealed at the right time." When evening fell, candles were lit in the dimmed hall. Bennett invited everyone to gather in a large circle, then closed the door. Families huddled on the floor, children clutching blankets, parents trading amused glances. Bennett's voice grew softer as he implored them to share what burdens they carried, to confess fears in front of the group, promising spiritual renewal. By the time the retreat ended late that night, Grace felt both uplifted and unsettled by the intensity of the emotions Bennett had stirred. Over the next week, whispers began circulating among the staff. A maintenance crew reported discovering fresh mortar in the basement, as if someone had recently bricked over a section of wall. A custodian noticed the church's blueprints didn't match the actual layout. Rooms had shifted, hallways extended. Yet when anyone asked Bennett about renovations, he deflected. Minor repairs, routine updates. No one pressed further. After all, a pastor's schedule was full of higher priorities. 3 days later, mid-morning, a piercing shout rattled the silence in the fellowship hall. A worker had pried at the newly bricked section and stumbled into a narrow crawlspace. Inside lay the skeletal remains of a teenage boy. His ribs were splayed, as though clutched by a heavy weight, and a small gold cross had been driven through bone and spine alike. The gruesome tableau prompted an immediate lockdown. News vans converged on the church, their satellite dishes sprouting like alien creatures on the lawn. Detective Rachel Torres arrived first, her trench coat swirling through the crowd. She surveyed the scene with professional detachment, masking the appalled curiosity she always felt in cases of ritualistic violence. Beneath the tempered gaze, however, she noted the meticulousness. The clean brickwork, the plastic-coated rope remnants, tiny circles of salt scattered around the body's head. This was not a random killing. It was a message. Within 24 hours, workers uncovered 2 more secret chambers, each containing adult victims bound in pairs, faces frozen in a hideous parody of devotion. Burlap sacks covered their heads, faint patterns, pentagrams, inverted crosses, cryptic runes, had been painted on the walls nearby. In the second room, a wilted prayer card from 1998 lay smeared with dried blood, a relic of someone's once faithful prayers turned to horror. On live television, Bennett appeared before a throng of cameras, his suit immaculate. He spoke with measured sorrow. "We have lost precious members of our family in unspeakable circumstances. Let me assure you, we will cooperate fully. God's light will prevail." Reporters noted a tremor in his voice, but parishioners heard conviction. The community rallied around him, until the bodies kept coming. A 4th chamber was discovered hidden behind the pastor's private office. Inside lay the bodies of 5 more victims, men and women who had attended Bennett's clandestine late-night prayer meetings. Their hands were bound with the same coarse rope, and between their feet lay a small altar holding melted candle stumps and faded school photographs pinned with rusted nails. The photographs sent a chill through everyone. They were of children, presumed to be Bennett's spiritual lambs, their faces normal, innocent, utterly out of place in this blood-spattered crypt. Bennett was arrested that night, walked from the church in handcuffs, while cameras clicked. He wore his clerical collar still, as if it were armor, and offered no resistance. In the interrogation room, Detective Torres faced him across a steel table. Bennett's eyes, however, remained unwavering. "Pastor Bennett," Torres began, her voice firm, "we have your contractor's testimony, the forensic analysis of the bindings, your own renovation invoices. Everything points to premeditation. Why would you build secret rooms to conceal victims under your own church?" Bennett leaned back, the single overhead light casting shadows beneath his brow. He spoke softly. "Detective, there are realms of truth most deemed too sacred for the uninitiated. My congregation entrusted me with guiding their spirits through darkness, even if that path meant separation from the world above." He paused. Those rooms were places of transformation, silent retreats for souls weighed down by sin. Torres felt a flicker of disgust. "You call bondage transformation?" She slammed a file on the table. "These people died. They were tortured. They volunteered," he replied calmly. "Their sacrifices were gifts, offerings for cleansing." His gaze bore into hers. "I merely facilitated their passage." Over the next weeks, the investigation peeled back the layers of Bennett's life. Born Michael A. Bennett, he'd grown up in a devout household where sermons were studied like law, and unquestioning obedience was drilled as piety. In seminary, he'd been fascinated by martyrdom, ancient texts describing Christians who chose death over denial of faith. He studied the Eleusinian mysteries, Mithraic rites, early Gnostic movements, all cults that believed in the sanctity of blood and ritual. Interviews with former classmates revealed his propensity for midnight gatherings in cryptic places, unused chapels, disused basements. He would whisper about divine fire and secret sacrifices, recruiting a small inner circle who kept oath-bound silence. After ordination, Bennett's sermons became more intense, peppered with allegories of purification through suffering. He attracted followers who craved meaning in pain, and his small church began to grow. Mary Ann Aldrich, daughter of a local pastor, joined Bennett's seminary circle and soon became his wife and chief lieutenant. Her diaries, later subpoenaed, detailed vows of blood brotherhood, confessions of visions behind church walls, and dreams of building a sanctuary beneath sanctuaries. Married in 2011, she managed church finances and supervised remodeling projects that added classrooms and storage, perfect covers for the creation of hidden chambers. Courtroom footage played Bennett's secret blood and spirit sermon, recorded by an undercover usher. On the tape, his rich voice intoned, "The Lamb's blood is our passkey, each drop a covenant between mortal and divine. Only through ritual can we transcend the flesh." As he spoke, low percussion thumped in the background, like distant drums of a massacre. Families of the victims sat in the gallery, tears streaming as the scriptural perversions were revealed. Their loved ones had not simply vanished. They had been offered up in the name of holiness. Mitchell, whose daughter Leah was among the bound adults, could barely choke out her testimony. She trusted him. She thought she was serving God until she was buried alive. The jury convicted Bennett on 14 counts of first-degree murder and sacrilege. As the foreperson read guilty, the massive oak doors remained open, letting in the afternoon sun as though bearing witness. First Grace Community Church was condemned. Its stained glass windows were removed and sold to pay victim restitution. Its pews were donated, its altar dismantled. A group of survivors formed Grace After Grace to support those shaken by spiritual abuse. Legislators passed the Shepherd's Safeguard Act to require background checks and transparent building permit processes for faith institutions. Grace Fletcher and Daniel spoke at the legislative hearings, recounting the night they first noticed the "do not open" crate and dismissed their unease. Their 2 sons, now under therapy for childhood trauma, stood beside them. "We learned the hard way. Grace told lawmakers, "Trust is precious, but we must guard it with questioning hearts." In the end, the horror beneath the church became a cautionary tale, a reminder that evil can masquerade behind the kindest faces, and that faith, wielded without oversight, can become a weapon. True devotion uplifts, it never demands blood. And in the ruins of First Grace, survivors discovered that the brightest light can emerge only after the darkest secrets are brought to day. Follow True Crime Revelation for part 2 of this story. Until our next exploration, stay tuned. Stay focused, stay brave, and above all, stay safe.